many friends around here. We are very happy, really glad that you are here. School of Radiology is small, it's personal, it's passionate. My name is Matthias, professor at University Erlangen, and together with Pascal, we're running this little platform. And this is the third series, actually, of a series which started 2 years ago with a symposium which we had together with our friends from Germany back then. And we started and was super successful because we were really passionate about what we're doing, and we are also passionate about editing. And this is a double role. This platform is basically primarily founded for teaching purposes. Many of you know that, have been on our courses, but Pascal and myself are passionate editors. And this is why we know how important it is to assess, to understand the quality of scientific work and the written format of doing a judgment of a scientific paper. That's a review. And this is why we set up this series, basically to share with friends from our networks and famous colleagues how to publish with success, basically to learn from the editors from the very first paper on. And this has been a wonderful series, has been a great fun. And for those of you who are joining late, and for those of you who are friends who said, oh my gosh, I missed this one, don't worry. This is gonna be posted on our YouTube channel. It's one of our most successful videos. I'm gonna share the link later on, and we're gonna share it also with email, so you don't miss any minute of this symposium and the first previous editions. So, we've been teaching as a team, and teamwork is key in anything you do, in radiology and in life. And we are so happy that we convinced David Bluemke and Jacob Sosna to team up, for today at least. Maybe later on, once again, we would be more than happy to join at a team of editors who are sharing their knowledge, their wisdom, and their experience with junior, senior, and advanced researchers, because it's so important. My impression as an editor handling over 1,500 papers a year is that mistakes are keeping repeated over and over again because we do not really have structured teaching. And this is why it's great to have an online platform like that to connect independently with great image quality and worldwide. We are happy that more than 180 people registered to our today's symposium from 40 countries, which is really, really cool. I know many of them personally, many of them are new here, and this is why I basically want to interact with you guys together with all the audience and the auditorium to learn from you. And this is why I'm now starting the first poll. They basically can share, although we are not here face to face, your background, the level of career. You can share some comments, what you expect from this symposium that we will discuss later on. You can share your career level, so we know basically where at the development of your CV you are and where you learned about this course. Please take your time, because I will give you 2 or 3 minutes to answer these polls, because it's very important to know your background. And please also share your questions. This is a unique chance basically to learn from the best in the fields. And here I'm obviously not speaking about myself, but about our honorary guest today. So be interactive, answer the polls. And hopefully after this course, you will agree that School of Radiology, yes, it's a small platform, but it's really among friends. There are no hierarchies here, and it's gonna be hopefully a lot of fun. We're doing a lot of stuff while you're answering your polls. I'm happy that already 70 of the 190 registrants are joining us live. Don't worry, you won't miss a minute, because we're gonna stream this, put this on our YouTube later on. There are lots of courses here. This is not for promo, just to make yourself familiar with what we are doing here. This is focus this year is breast imaging and prostate imaging. You are still answering the polls, so I will go further to the program. Take your time, don't worry, you will have to do that. 30 of 70 live registrants have already answered the polls, so I give you time because it's so important for us to learn from you, from your background. I will quickly go through the program. We will virtually in 4 minutes start the show. Don't worry, everything will be in time. I will be the director later on. So the topic The framing of today's session is twofold. First, we will have great keynote lectures by Jacob Sosna and David Bluemke about what makes a review great. And this is first of all, a structured learning approach, but it's also a lesson learned approach from really experienced editors in the leading journal in our field. And I think this certainly will give enough food for thoughts and discussions, and this will be a great teaser, a great starting point to kick up the final panel discussion. And this is not like a 1 or 2 questions thing, which we sometimes have when we are running out of time. We have really 40 minutes, and take your time and ask the questions. Talking about all questions, please, to me. In 2 minutes, I will step in the background and I will listen to the keynotes by Jacob and David, and I will be from then the director, the moderator. So all the questions to me, I'm gonna collect the questions and I'm gonna then ask them to our fellow guests. So at 8:45 p.m. Central European Time, obviously, we will be at the end of the event. I will open afterwards an attendance poll. So in case you want to have a CME, you have to be obviously registered to Symposium, and you will have to fill out the poll. And if your data matches, you will get your CV latest tomorrow morning in Europe. So by now, 51 people have answered the poll, 52. Pascal, maybe you will now introduce our first guest speaker, Jacob Sosna, and you guys still take the time. I'm happy to see that you are still answering the polls and that we will do the keynote discussion and switch over. Pascal, welcome to Vienna, and let our guests know, I mean, there will be only very, very few about Jacob Sosna, why he's here, and why we're so happy and honored to now listen to his keynote. Pascal.
So Jacob Sosna is the chairman of the Radiology Center in Hadassah Hebrew University Medical Center. He has, as you already said, served as associate editor for radiology and built up the reviewer mentoring program. And we can really say we are very, very happy to have him on board also at the European Journal of Radiology, where he can continue this success story. Professor Sosna is really one very, very distinguished colleague and is very knowledgeable on the topic. So actually, Jacob, it's really an honor that you're here, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation.
So, as we can see, we have an interview with Dr. Röntgen on page 325, and then the editor asks Dr. Röntgen, I asked him, what did you think? And he said, very simply, I did not think, I investigated. And this was asked about what did he think when he found the X-rays. The interesting thing was that Röntgen didn't know English, and the editor of AJR didn't know any German, so they spoke in Latin, which was the common language they used. So knowledge in science is based on personal experience, departmental habits and experience, which are at the lower end of science, national meetings, international forums, data from the web, social media, Google, but these are all personal and non-peer-reviewed processes. The publishing process is something else. Most scientific discoveries and research are published in scientific journals. Before publication, scientific articles are submitted to peer review and subjected to scrutiny by peers, by experts in the same field. What type of articles do we have? So we can have case series, we can have retrospective studies, prospective studies, experimental studies, hypothesis-driven, and most of our studies need indeed to be hypothesis-driven. When we look and we evaluate an article, and David did it for many years as the editor of radiology, what we look for is about is the article novel? Is it important? Or is it interesting and or informative? So what about the novelty? So does it add any new information, provide new concepts, describes new technology, defines new diagnostic or therapeutic approaches, or resolves existing controversies. And about the importance, so does it change the practice? New tools that you can use, new algorithms of AI, new generation of CTs with photon counting, new MRIs, sequences, strength of the magnetic field, helps us understand biology or technology. Does it generate a new hypothesis, or does it stimulate further research? And about the interesting and or informative part, so does it add considerably to our available information? Does it draw conclusions that provide clear direction, or does it provide useful information? So what is the impact of publishing? Okay, so we got a manuscript, it was published, and then it's out there and published in the virtual world. Now it's mostly non-paper based publishing. So it's new knowledge. It can change our practice. It promotes health because we change the way we treat patients, and we become better radiologists for the benefit of our patients, which is the most important part. The difference between learning something new by yourself is you treat one patient, but if you publish your results, your impact is much larger because a very large number of patients might benefit by using a new technology. For instance, the guys that invented radiofrequency ablation, when they published their first papers, they didn't know what would be the impact for the long term all over the world. So when we publish the peer review are different possibilities. The most common one is double-blinded, where the author as well as the reviewers don't know each other. That's the most common one. The single-blinded is when the reviewers know who is the author and not the other way around. And the open approach is when you both know each other. What are the benefits or of the double-blind system? The double-blind helps us. We are not biased. For instance, a young reviewer, when he needs to evaluate a very senior author, would be he would have troubles in rejecting the manuscript of this very high-level radiologist. On the other hand, if the author knows it's a very young reviewer, we say, okay, this stupid reviewer, he doesn't know anything. So when it's double-blind, it's much easier. Now, it's very common that we have single-blinded as well as open, and this is more democratic in a sense that you know who is reviewing your manuscript. The types of decisions that can be made are accept with minor revisions, major revisions are encouraged, or reject. After publication, the research results are used by other researchers for their own studies and cited as reference in their subsequent articles. The citation of one paper by another is characteristic of scientific publications, and it is generally accepted that the number of citations of a particular article is a reflection of its impact in the scientific community. And we do have bibliometrics. Those are indicators that can help physicians in selecting the best journals to read. For scientists, bibliometric indicators are important because they allow objective measurements of the diffusion and the impact of reports published by a particular journal among the scientific community. Practically, these indicators can help scientists in selecting the journals where to submit their manuscript. And I would say that the impact factor of radiology, I believe, is more than 30 currently. So the bibliometrics, we have quantity indicators measuring the productivity of a particular researcher, and there are also quality indicators. Measuring the quality of a researcher output is also important. And we have structural indicators measuring connections between publications, authors, and areas of research. So what's the quantity metrics? So these are the number of publications. If one is considered for promotion, then some committees would ask, what is the number of your manuscript that you published? And also the second question is, what is the number of publications in the top-ranked journal? The New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, and journals like that. Then we have the performance indicators. The higher the number of citations, the higher the performance. The citation numbers can be divided by the number of years within a period of time to produce the average citations per year, which is also used. Impact factor, which we are all familiar with, is a measure of the citation of a journal. It is intended to gauge the importance of a journal in its given field. The impact factor was first proposed in 1955 by Garfield, and it's currently named ISI Journal Impact Factor. Is probably the most widely used indicator. IF values are available in the Journal Citation Report and on the Web of Knowledge for more than 10,000 selected scientific journals. It is established in each year and recalculated based on the previous 2 years period. The number of times articles are published during a given 2-year period, cited in journals during the year after the given period. So if 500 citations were in a year and then the journal published 250 publications, then the impact factor would be 2. For instance, the impact factor in 2007 of radiology was 5.5, based on almost 5,000 citations, and this went up after a few years. And as I mentioned, in last year it was 30. I mean, it's an extreme high number, which is very valuable. If we look at the most famous ones, the New England Journal of Medicine, it is 150 to 200 impact factor, meaning that on average, if each manuscript is published or cited more than 150 times. Another performance indicator is the H index, which is for a particular researcher is the number, the H number among his N articles of at least 8 citations, meaning, for instance, H index of 10 means that 10 of one scientist's publications were cited at least 10 times. If it's higher, for instance, 30, it means that 30 of the manuscripts were cited at least 30 times. So let's go back now to the reviewer development. The standard reviewer development is individual. It's not standardized. There is no school like the School of Radiology that we have here that teaches you how to review. It is based on intuitive judgment and is based on personal experience. For instance, when you have a paper rejected, you can say they don't like this topic. The 8 are medical centers, they understand nothing, which is a very common way of dealing, and not thinking maybe my manuscript can be improved by that. And with this rejection, I would like to tell you a story. We had a manuscript that we submitted to a medium range journal in ultrasound, and it was rejected. Then we improved based on the reviewer comments. We improved the manuscript and it was submitted to radiology and accepted. So take this notion, and if you do the changes and people do this review for free, you have the best people that review the articles, they invest time and take their comments and suggestions as ones that would make your manuscript better. So how does a journal select reviewers? It is usually within the same area of interest, based on prior publications, recommendations by other reviewers, recommendations by peers. I remember the breakfasts of the radiology reviewers and associate editors meetings at RSNA, and usually they ask us, give us some name of the possible reviewers that you know in your department, and this is the way reviewers were added. So how I became a reviewer, and this is I took it from the site of radiology, and I reviewed starting from January 2005, 231 papers for radiology. Maybe it's a little bit more now. I prepared it about 2 months ago. And if you look, the first one that I got was a case report. Inverted Meckel's vertical with ectopic pancreatic tissue, imitating chronic pancreatitis and small bowel tumor, case report. So I remember this case report, but since then, more than 200 manuscripts I reviewed, and for many other journals as well. Then I did the Eiler Editorial Fellowship, which was a very important step in my professional life. It is an opportunity for mid-career radiologists to further their experience in radiological journalism by working with giants, with RSNA journal editors and publication staff. Eiler Fellows learn about manuscript preparation and editing, peer review, journal production, printing, and digital publishing. I did it in 2006. And then I met Tony Porter, who was the editor at that time. And the first day I came, he gave me a batch of 10 manuscripts to review, all paper ones. And I looked at them. One was pediatric radiology, the other neuroradiology, the third one in another subspecialty. And I told him, Dr. Porter, sorry, I don't know those topics. And he said, you don't always need to understand this topic, but you always need to understand the science. And this is the most important point, is once you're a reviewer, you should look first of all at the science and not so much to the technicalities of a manuscript. So why are new reviewers needed? And this is the generational impact, and therefore I'm very happy that we have young colleagues here with us. Older reviewers with more experience tend to assign a lower score for overall manuscript importance. They would say, you know, there's no manuscript can be better than mine. So then they score lower. Older reviewers favor manuscripts more in the accord with their own views. They are less open for change, while younger reviewers seem to be more open-minded, and younger reviewers and those of more junior academic rank have the potential to produce more incisive and thoughtful reviews compared with their older and seasoned colleagues. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Radiology Mentor Review Program that started in 2020 under the leadership of Dr. David Bluemke, who I'm happy that he is here with us. So what is the Mentored Review Program? The concept is to leverage the experience and wisdom of more senior reviewers to provide feedback to new reviewers for the journal. New reviewers are paired with senior reviewers by the RSNA office. Senior reviewers provide constructive feedback and advice, allowing new reviewers to compare their manuscript, critique, and thoughts to their mentors. The mentees get up to 6 manuscripts for mentored review. The mentors and mentees get the same manuscript prior to formal submission of a review to radiology. The mentor and mentee review the approved review together. Then the mentor personally critiques the mentee's review, and the final formal submission may contain insightful comments identified by the mentee. So how do I review, and actually how do I mentor a reviewer? First of all, I read the manuscript and think about the manuscript for 1 to 2 days. I never write the review in the same day. I think that I drive the car, and then while going home, I think about the strengths and the weaknesses the weaknesses of the manuscript, because then I get to change my scoring from accept. I might think about limitations and things that could be made better. As I said, thinking for 1 to 2 days, which is the two most important part, and there is no hurry. We have 14 days or so, nothing happens if you think for 1 or 2 days. Then I prepare a draft of the review. I do additional changes, sorry for the spelling mistake, and then I submit the review. The mentoring process is the same. We read the manuscript, then I let the mentee think about it for a day or two as myself. I ask the mentee to prepare a draft, we review it together, physically or online. We do additional changes and then submit the review. And here are a few examples of what is jointly evaluated or evaluated by a reviewer like me. So what are the do's and don'ts? First of all, we should ask ourselves, what are the key points that reflect the purpose of the study? This is the most important part. Don't try as an author, or if you're a reviewer, you should don't try to describe the whole disease history from the 19th century. We are not speaking about the history of tuberculosis from the Greek days 2,000 years ago. Then, if we think about the key points, they are essentially like the purpose. The purpose was to evaluate something. Then the key point was we evaluated the value of this sequence in MRI and showed that it is better than the prior version of this sequence. It is better to have a well-defined essential purpose rather than diffuse purpose. Purpose is the backbone of the study and impacts all sections of a paper. Now for the abstract. The abstract is very structured. The purpose should be identical to that as in the introduction. It shouldn't be different. The material and methods, you should state the IRB or the Helsinki Committee approval obtained. What was done and how was it done? Also in the material and methods and statistical tests that were employed. Then the results include the numbers, the observations, the p-values, and the conclusion is what is the key point. So we need to ensure that the study is ethical, to structure the methods in a way that somebody else can exactly reproduce the work. And we shouldn't forget to include statistical sections. Statistical methods are often complex, but how they analyze the data is not. There should be a brief explanation. Most of us are not statisticians, so get statistical consult early. It would obviate problems that might arise. And then we should ask ourselves, what are the variables and are they well defined? Now to the results. We should make sure that any result has a corresponding method, that results are not too extensive. We might add a diagram, a figure, a visual aid that would make it better. Make sure that the reader understands the results and the statistics assess all the data gathered. Now to the discussion. Don't start with a long literature review. We don't need to repeat the introduction. We don't need to restate all results, and don't stray from the key points. The discussion is better split into a few paragraphs. The first paragraph would be, what is the main finding of the current of our study? What did you find and why is it important? The second one is, what have others found and why are your results better or different, confirmatory to the data that is already in the literature? Then number 3 is, what were the limitations of the study? Don't forget, we are not perfect. No study is perfect, and we should specify the limitations of our study. And then, optional, what, if anything, comes next. So, let's take an example of paragraph 1 in the discussion. In the study, we show that as compared to CT, MR is as accurate in detection HCC. These findings are important because patients may be diagnosed without ionizing radiation. Boom. That's the main message. This is what the readers should take from this study, and this is basically what they have learned. Number 2, previous authors using retrospective analysis in small case series have noted equivalence in accuracy between MRI and CT. Our study is novel as it adds to the current literature showing that MRI is better. That's the comparison of our results to the results already shown in the literature. Discussion paragraph number 3. Our study has several limitations. First, readers were not blinded. Second, inter-observer variability was only moderate, and we did not assess intra-observer variability. Some of the limitations can be obvious, some are not, but it doesn't mean that if you specify your limitations, then the paper won't be accepted. It's much better to specify it, put it up front, and then explain to the reviewer and to the editor, why do you think those limitations are not so significant that won't make the manuscript publishable? And then the last paragraph, discussion paragraph 4, our studies call for the need for additional prospective and blinded studies in this field. And then a few dots, we plan such a study, and then we end. Now let's go on and finish with a few issues, and the first one is the issue of authorship. To be listed as an author, an individual should have made substantial contribution in all 4 categories established by the ICMJE. First of all, the conception and design, drafting of the articles, final approval of the version to be published, and agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work. So we must remember, your chairman is not an automatic author. It does happen a lot in Asia, in some places in Europe, where it is expected that all chairmen, and we have seen department chairman with 700 manuscripts, which doesn't seem to be logical, or 50 manuscripts a year. It's a bit too much for a normal person to write. The issue of guest versus ghost authorship. Guest authorship means that although listed on the byline, the author may not have met authorship criteria for active participation in the research, manuscript drafting, and approval. As I mentioned before, the senior department staff. Ghost authorship, on the other hand, is somebody fulfills authorship criteria but not listed, commonly associated with guest authorship in industry-sponsored manuscript. An article written by company X, given to a radiologist, the radiologist and his and some other people are put as authors, but basically it's a manuscript that was invited by the company, paid by the company, and this is something that shouldn't be done. So the issue of honorary authorship in radiological research, it does happen. This is an article written by Ron Eisenberg a few years ago, and there is no honor in honorary authorship, written again by Herb Kressel, who was the former editor of radiology as well. Then we have an issue of redundant publication or salami slicing. The Council of Science editor defines redundant publication as reporting substantially the same work more than once without attribution of the original sources. Any work that has been previously published in a language other than English is also redundant publication. I'll give you a few examples. You have a case series of 40 patients, then after a year you have 48 and you publish it again. This is not a real science. When you do a meta-analysis and you combine 40 with 48, that's not a real number. Another issue is if you have a manuscript published, let's say in Korean, and then after that it's published the same article in English, this is redundant publication. This is not something that should be done. Maybe I shouldn't mention Korean, let's say in Hebrew. We will publish an article in Hebrew and the same article with no changes will be published in English. This is something that shouldn't be done. Plagiarism and redundant manuscript screening. So plagiarism is copying from other people's work, and there are now currently software that do this evaluation automatically, and if there is more than 15% similarity, it highlights a red flag. Now it's quite famous with the former president of Harvard that was accused of plagiarism in our PhD that was published recently. And also the issue of ChatGPT should also be avoided because ChatGPT is something that is nice to have, but that's not a way to publish. Don't trust ChatGPT for scientific information. One of my colleagues in my department was supposed to give a talk at the last ECR, and the night before she found out that all the data that she got from ChatGPT was garbage. It was nonsense. Those articles didn't exist and the numbers were fake. So check PubMed, check real libraries. Don't use ChatGPT for real scientific data. So to sum up, I would say that publications are essential for advancing in the academic ladder. I urge you to be involved early in your career, find mentors, and become a reviewer. When you become a reviewer, you become a better author. I must say it for myself, because I know what to look for and what to avoid. And with that, I would like to thank you, and my email is here below. If anyone is interested in comments or in asking me questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. That was also from my point of view really an excellent summary, I think, for everyone. You gave really some really insightful expert tips, I think. There was some general things that really summed it up, really excellent. So we will discuss that later because there are some aspects I pinned down a number of questions for the panel discussion. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our second speaker, Professor David Bluemke. I guess he is also known actually by everyone because he has been the editor of Radiology. I think if I get it right, 2017 to 2022, right? He's a professor at the Department of Radiology. He received a MD and a PhD at the University of Chicago, actually a PhD in biophysics. His whole career was overlapping with the really enthusiastic run for MRI technology. So you will not be astonished that he is really one of the pioneers in cardiovascular imaging. And just to have just a feeling for the impact he has actually an H index. You just learned in the last talk what the H index is, I think of 151 if you ask Google Scholar, and 150,000 citations, which is quite impressive. But actually, I will keep myself short because I personally, David, I want to hear your talk. So, and I think the others much more. So please, the stage is yours.
First of all, let me thank you very much for the privilege of being here with you all. This is a fantastic seminar session. I'm going to tell our staff and junior faculty and residents about it. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here. You've heard from the master on reviewing with Jacob already. It's just really comprehensive, and I think I'll maybe just be able to do a little bit around that, a little bit highlighting mostly my agreement more than anything. Just to get going here, I am at the University of Wisconsin. If you've been to the RSNA, this is in Madison, Wisconsin. It's about 2 hours north of Chicago in the RSNA. This is the capital city of the state, and I live right about a block from the Capitol. There's 2 lakes on the other side. It's very nice, especially when there's not so much snow as is now. It's a very active city. There's a tremendous amount of sports and activities. People are very passionate about their sports activities, like in a lot of other areas. And in the winter, this is a far north area where we go to. Pretty cold right now, about, I think, minus 20 C this past week. And now it's getting warmer. So now we're about 0. So it's goes up and down for another couple of weeks. Okay, well, let me just make a summary. This is kind of my whole talk here. And I'm going to focus on peer review. As you've heard, this peer review is a critical safeguard for us. It enables our advances in science and medicine, keeps people on their toes, keeps the data concise and clear, I think. Regarding reviewing, which is a lot of what this is about, the outstanding reviewer has a high degree of respect for all authors. I think that's really critical. This is not so easy to do, as you know, from being an author. As a reviewer, I think it just to get a paper out, to get the paper submitted is very, very difficult. It's challenging to get it accepted. And then from my point of view, when we look at the manuscript, there's two issues. One is the data quality, of course, but then to improve your input to the editors, the great reviews should also address on the importance of the topic. Is this a really mainstream topic? If it's a very narrow topic, that's okay. You just have to make sure the topic fits the journal in those cases. Okay, well, I got very interested in this really because of Dr. Sosna, who is well known to be an outstanding pioneer in this area of peer review. And we wrote this article a couple of years ago at the beginning of the pandemic. Are these peer-reviewed publications still needed? After all, there's unlimited information available in Google and other search engines, really completely unlimited. You can publish for free on one of several platforms. Just to give you a comparison, the amount of posts each month, 12,000 from this one archive platform. In radiology, there are 250 per year that are published. So extraordinary publications. We used to get, it's Twitter/X. I used to get information there. Now I don't pay quite as much of attention, but all sorts of places for information. So right now, I think right now what we need, unlimited information, is not the problem, clearly. What we need is reliable information. We know about the AI, ChatGPT, and so forth. We know about hallucinations. What is real? So it is up to you as a reviewer to help each other determine, is this really reliable information? I'm going to give you an example. I was the editor of radiology during the pandemic. And as terrible as that was for the entire world, what we learned in our field and every field is the need for peer-reviewed science. And I would say that between archive, free resources like Twitter and so forth, it demonstrated more or less a very strong degree of failure for scientific soundness in those approaches. We had concepts such as ivermectin for treatment, silver nanoparticles, melatonin, and so forth for treatment of SARS that was put out there, and nearly all of these were debunked eventually. So this is just a minor portion of the information that was available on archive. So much was debunked when it was eventually published. So peer-reviewed science, the best option we have for scientific soundness. So a couple points about review. As Dr. Sosna mentioned, if you're writing papers, hopefully you're reviewing papers as well, maybe starting to review first. It helps strengthen your own papers. It's a mutual responsibility that we have. As an author, and a member of the scientific community, you're expected to be a peer review. So how do you do this? It's politeness, it's professionalism, it's respect for your colleagues, and that has to come through in the writing, even though you're very busy, even though you may not like this particular topic or not. It's really critical. Try to be helpful, even to the most inexperienced authors. They inexperienced authors, we know that we're inexperienced on a topic. That's not the point. But to get some help and guidance from you as a reviewer is really helpful. Now, as a little bit of incentive, virtually all journals grade the reviewers, not only grading the papers, but they grade the reviewers, the quality of the review. So it doesn't have to be a thesis. It has to be sound, should be concise. The reviews that you write are graded basically on timeliness and quality. How helpful is it? Was it a cursory review at a superficial level, or did you spend a little time on it? So it's very, very helpful to being on editorial boards to have good reviews as well. If an author is not a native English speaker, they know it. We don't need to tell authors that there's some need for native English speaking. English happens to be the language in the majority of publications that people are submitting to, but this does not help the authors. And we see this probably more frequently from authors from the US. They give this comment, and in the Radiology Journal, we have tried to remove that comment. It's not really helpful for the authors. They know or not whether they are native English speakers. So that's not the point. Okay, so Dr. Sosna and I also wrote this editorial, as was mentioned, on writing a great review for radiology. So the structure that we suggested, a short summary of the article can be 2, 3, 4 sentences, and then outlining 2 or 3, 4 key strengths, what are a couple of key weaknesses, and then specific comments. It's very, very helpful to have comments to the editor. Those should distill all your comments down. This is an inexperienced group, but I think they've got a good point to make. That might be sufficient. This is a terrific topic, but maybe it's not for your journal, something like that. Okay, but please remember, the manuscripts have been sent to you in confidence. Your professionalism goes along with this. Don't circulate the manuscript. You can't really use it in your department. You can't use that paper for talks. It's supposed to be between you and the journal. It is treating that manuscript and those authors like you would like to be treated for your own paper. That's very, very important. Okay, just a couple of words. This happens to everybody. I have these spectacular reviews. Why was it rejected? What, the reviewers, they seem terrific. What's the issue here? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Most commonly, it's not any one particular thing. It's just that the editorial board and the editor is only allowed to publish a certain number of papers. Maybe they just got 5 other papers on breast imaging and they'd like to publish some other topics as well. This was number 6. Well, it still may be an outstanding article, but it's most frequently because it's a matter of some resource issues. Radiology, for example, we have maintained over many years the ability to publish in multiple topics. There are going to be many good articles in GI, abdominal, breast imaging, and so forth that they're just not going to be space for it unless we focus too much on that. The other interesting topic that we want to be aware of as reviewers, this is a long time ago, 1991, former editor of radiology, Dr. Siegelman. I worked with him and trained with him, and he wrote this really interesting article about 2 types of reviewers, assassins and zealots. And think about it when you're doing your own review. If this is a field that you're an expert in already, there are some reviewers who want to get rid of all the other competition in the field. And, just unconsciously, this is not as good as my work. This can't be good. So I'm not going to give it a good score. So be aware of that. Try to remove your biases if you can. And then there's another type of attitude called zealots. And these are people who promote their own field. Let's say there's a new type of imaging, a new pulse sequence for MRI, and they just like anything having to do with that, they're working on it, and this must be the best thing. So we need to balance and be somewhere, hopefully, in between on these issues. So in conclusions, then, the main questions that I ask prior to recommending a paper for publication, number one, is it important? Is this an important topic? And number two, if it's a good topic and a good fit for that journal, then is the science well done? Is it solid paper? Are the conclusions following from the results? And of course, we're always trying to seek answers to yes, and therefore there'd be rapid publication in that case.
So with that, I have the pleasure to kick off the panel discussion, and I'm already collecting tons of questions. So please write all the questions to me. I will move in the background and collect them and moderate them. Here are superb experienced editors and leaders in our field which answer your question directly. With that, I've got the pleasure and honor to kick off the panel discussion. And we have plenty of time, and it's my big pleasure to welcome now in the panel, beyond Jacob and David, Dr. Isabel Mulbridge. Isabel most likely won't need any introduction because she has been part in all of our previous symposia. She's one of the leaders in the German society when it comes to young residents, and it's her core topic. Isabel, I won't mention all your academic and clinical achievements, just a warm welcome. And thank you very much for joining once again, and a warm welcome to Hamburg. How is it there? Coldish, snow even?
It's cold, but usually it doesn't snow that much here. It rather rains.
All right. Thanks for being here. And Pascal, maybe you want to introduce our second panelist, Namar. She was joining us from Jerusalem live. Namar Lev-Cohen.
Namar Lev-Cohen is working in the same department, actually, under Jacob. And she is, I think, the head of the MRI unit. That is very sympathetic to me, actually, as I'm also the big MRI fan, and I'm very much looking forward to our discussion here. And how are you, Nama?
I'm fine, thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I have one question regarding the reliability of information and about peer review. Because, you know, peer review is not such an old thing. For instance, Einstein didn't publish his work in peer-reviewed journals. At that time, it was just, you just put out the journal and the paper, the article, the science, and was judged by the community, but in a more open way. So my question, probably starting to Jacob, but also to David, would Einstein's first paper, would it have been published in a peer-reviewed journal if we consider the assassins and zealots theory, for instance?
I don't know, but if you think about Hounsfield, he published his paper about CT in the British Journal of Radiology, and he wasn't a professor of radiology. He was an engineer, he was never in academics. But those are outliers. There are some cases where you would have geniuses that wouldn't be accepted into the scientific community because they are so different than the others. But on the other end, in order to keep the level of science at a high level, peer review is the best system that we have. It's not perfect. You know, we usually have 2 reviewers. Maybe if we had 10, it was better, and we would compare the different opinions. But it's a reliable, it's a strong way of promoting science, and it ensures that the information published is not anecdotal.
And one could just to follow it up, because you also got the interesting observation, which I also made, but I think you have much more experience in pairing senior and non-senior reviewers. That as I said, that senior reviewers tend to be more critical, and junior reviewers tend to be more convinced by new ideas, by new research. Did you really observe it? It would have been very interesting to have an empirical observation on that, like on numbers, right? Because I think it was a very convincing point I've not heard before. But when I heard it, it was very convincing because I think it matches my own observations.
As far as I know, I remember that in radiology, if you look at the reviewers that get the certificate of special distinction, or most of them are in the mid-career. They are not very, like the very senior ones. Because when you are in your mid-career, you want to prove yourself and show that you do it. And when you're older and more experienced, you tend probably to invest less time in that. You have other commitments. And I think I'm not aware of a study that actually quantified it, but I know that it does happen.
Perhaps if I just may add another question, Pascal, to you, Jacob, because you also mentioned like the different types of peer review, single-blinded, double-blinded. And recently I've heard from some journalists that they switched from, for example, a double-blinded to a single-blinded review, or also that they are reducing the number of reviewers, which I believe, I'm not an expert on it like you are, obviously, but I thought it might have been because the journals are having difficulties finding enough reviewers, enough colleagues who are doing this voluntarily. So what do you think about this development? And isn't it perhaps dangerous to ensure the quality of the published articles?
David?
Probably, I would like to hear probably David's opinion on that first.
Yeah, Isabel, that's a really interesting question. So radiology, when I started, always required at least 3 reviewers, sometimes 4 reviewers. And over the years, probably starting about 10 years ago, the number of required reviewers was 2. And then we said, well, if we get differing opinions, first of all, we have the editor and the editorial board that can make the decision. And then more commonly, you would invite a 3rd reviewer in that case to make a decision. So right now, that is the practice. It's they use 2 reviewers. The problem of obtaining high quality reviews and having enough reviews is a substantial problem. Radiology starts with 4 invitations and actually is able to get 2 reviewers most of the time. They'll go up to about 10 reviewers. And then the peer review staff will contact the journal editor, say, look, I can't, who should we send this to? Somebody has got to review this paper. We can't get anybody to review it. A number of other review journals we hear about, they'll send initially to 10, 20, or 30 reviewers. There's one journal, a couple of journals that I review for in other fields outside of radiology. They have a competitive review. They'll send it to about 10 reviewers at the same time. If you don't click fast enough, you won't get to be a reviewer. And I kind of like that system as well. It makes me feel like if I want to review that paper, I grab it and react rather quickly. And so you're incentivized to review for that journal. So having enough reviewers is a problem. And as you mentioned, double versus single versus triple peer review blindedness. For us, it was just a matter of what the reviewers were used to. In radiology, we use a double blinded review system. So the authors and the reviewers don't know each other. The editorial board does. Triple blinded would be the editorial board is blinded as well. It's not easy to blind papers, number one. In the circumstance where we have not adequately blinded the reviewers, we have gotten very nasty negative comments from the reviewers and say, I know who the authors are. This is not blinded. And there are other problems that we have in the world and in the publishing area. So we decided not to make a big deal about it. But the majority of other fields outside of radiology that I review for, it's a single blinded review. And I think both can work.
Great. Thanks, David, for summing this up. And I can only say this was an obviously very important question. It's also dear to me as an editor myself, but it's been reached out by many attendees in the audience. And by the way, thanks very much, guys, for reaching out and keeping me so busy. So I'm writing and training my typewriting skills to get the question together. That's another question. I think it was from Singapore. What do you think, David and Jacob, obviously, and eventually also Pascal, about Publins or other kinds of peer review records? And they're keeping me busy. They're keeping my inbox busy. Are they really worth it?
I would say, I call it transparent work. It's a work that you do, nobody knows about it. Your chairman doesn't know about it. Maybe he or she gets once a year a certificate saying that you review for a journal. But this is the essence of being a scientist or being an academic radiologist, an academic physician. This is the essence. If you don't do it, you don't play the game. So the importance is, as I mentioned, first of all, you become a better author. Then those are the rules of the game. You send some articles, you review some articles, you go to conferences, you make colleagues, you give talks in sessions like this evening. This is what is expected from an academic radiologist.
Thank you. That's clear. And transparency, after all, is important. Also, every metric has its problems. It's quite obvious. Maybe David, do you have something to add, or everything clear?
Yeah, I mean, I get the same emails. We all get them. I think it's very reasonable to track what you're doing. Many of the departments, as Jacob mentioned, want to have some record of your activities. They're paying your salary to be an academic radiologist, and not only to read films, take care of patients, but increase the level of knowledge in the world. And this is one component. So yeah, I think that's quite reasonable to have your peer reviews tracked, at least the number. I think that's good, because if I have a junior staff member says he did or she did 60 reviews that month, I was like, well, that's a very large number. But you want to have some record of your participation. I think is quite reasonable. So a number of places also ask if you want your name published, I guess, if they're going to publish the paper in certain journals. That I don't know if that's, I get a little bit scared of Twitter sort of issues in those cases. I think I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm a little bit more traditional in this, but I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes more popular at some point as well.
Great, that's clear. And then obviously there is the evergreen question about not only the kind of topic-based selection approach, selecting your journal, but also the impact factor solution. Obviously, not everyone has a New England Journal paper in his desk, so we have all to make the decision, and then always the question about selecting a journal not only by the scope, but also by the impact factor comes around. I think we all know that. So what is your take on the impact factor? And I'm asking you more as an author, Jacob and David, not as an editor of radiology, just an author. How much is that important? Particularly in the age where publications are accessible more and more free of charge, open access.
I was the vice dean in our university of our medical faculty for promotions for 6 years. And one of the ways that we used to assess the productivity of a physician was the number of manuscripts and the impact factor. I know that in America, it's less common to assess the impact factor. For instance, as far as I know, if I'm not mistaken, in Karolinska, in Sweden, you should choose the best 5 articles, and this is what is assessed, not the total number, in order to be promoted. So I would say that impact factor has a meaning, but it also means, for instance, if you want to be known among radiologists and you have a manuscript in GU radiology, you can publish it in a urological journal, maybe with a higher impact factor, but nobody of your peers would read it. And I think that if you want to be known within your own community, so aim to publish within our own journals. And we have written with Naama a few manuscripts in different fields of radiology. We always send it to radiology journals. Very few are in non-radiology journals. If there are if there is a more of a clinical point of view. Naama, if you would like to add.
Yeah, I completely agree. We would try to we will try to submit. We will submit the manuscript and hopefully hope for its acceptance in the higher impact factor score radiology paper journal as the initial starting point. And if it is rejected, we will sort of go down a notch, still trying to, in my personal experience and preference, is try to get it accepted in the more commonly, more well-known manuscripts, although it means that it needs to be in a certain specific or certain level of quality. It asks for a more very designated sort of a format, which might be more difficult to achieve. We'll need more, the actual study will need to be with more, as mentioned before in both talks, more with a clinical impact, with a clinical value, to show the importance of it, of the information, not just presenting whatever data we acquired. And these important issues do need more time and much more input in when we're writing the manuscript. But at the end of the day, it's worthwhile. And of course, every rejection is sort of a pain in the inside, but you learn from it and you try to improve. And as mentioned before, the reviewers' comments are very, very helpful in many of the times. And I have to say on a personal note that having a reviewer saying just a short, very short paragraph without any added value and no real reason except for not so much is really embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I feel embarrassed for him as a reviewer. And I think that both Jacob and David mentioned that their very formatted review format is very important for us when we're on the other side, not writing the review, but getting it to feel appreciated, that this was read and some thought was given into it, and we have something to work with. And maybe it won't be accepted to this manuscript, to this paper, but we will assist it getting accepted somewhere else. And this is very, very important in our colleagues sort of interaction.
Thank you.
Probably, Matthias, I've also, so I think that the impact is a bit of a mixed bag, right? So I think if you want to be an established researcher in the field, you have to publish, you have to work in the field. As also Jacob says, you have to go to the conferences, you have to interact with your peers, and you have to publish. But then I think comes the impact factor. It's not about like, I published my 5 papers in radiology, but if I am a researcher and if I'm known, it's weird if I'm active in the field for a couple of years and never ever published in a high impact journal, right? The thing is, I think not that primarily you need or should publish in a high impact journal, but if I work in a field for like 10 years, it's a bit weird if I never came up with a study, or 15 years, and I never came up with a study that ended up in a higher impact journal. So I see many people, as a reviewer, I started to see it, that people just submitted the article to Radiology, where I had the honor to review, and the article was rejected. Then I got the same article without the authors doing any changes as a reviewer for investigative radiology. And still they did not do any changes and the article got rejected. And then I got the same article as a peer reviewer in European radiology, again, without any changes. So just a question. So first, as an author, I think you always need, as Naama also said, you need really to consider the reviews and constructively put them into your work and change the work. It really doesn't make any sense to just send it, but because again, it's peer review and you probably will end up, depending on the field, with the same reviewers. But of course, I think it may be quite annoying. So my question to David, what do you do with all those guys? Let's try radiology. Or what did you do with those guys? I mean, you may have seen, I think at a glance, you see, okay, come on, this is not a radiology paper.
Right, right. So that is increasingly happening. Some journals try to discourage that by having small submission fees and things like that. I hope radiology does not do that. But that COVID was a great example. We would receive maybe 80 papers on COVID in a week for a while. And there's no chance that they have the capability to publish that much. So there was a lot of pre-review and try and select which articles were there. I don't think that to reach high, to think that your topic, proud of your topic, to submit it to a journal that is a reach journal for you. To me, that's good. That means you have a goal. That means you're striving. I don't have a trouble with that. In the end, as you get a little bit more senior and more strategic, it does take a lot of time to submit to various journals, and each journal process may delay your publication if you're submitting it to the wrong journal for a number of reasons. Just a little bit of a straightforward example to understand. Radiology would get articles on dental radiology sometimes. Well, if that went out for peer review, it would slow down the authors for quite some time. Maybe it was really interesting. AI, artificial intelligence, is very prominent in dental radiology as well. But it may, if that goes out for review, it'll take 3 or 4 months from those authors. So trying to get your paper into the journal that is consistent with what they're publishing, that's quite important for the authors, because you just, it's going to take sometimes almost a year to get things published once it's accepted or once you submit it. So if you're kind of journal shopping a little bit, it's just taking your time, I think.
Great.
You don't have kind of lists of people who always submit to, for example, radiology without a reason. Because we all have had these discussions with colleagues where you've heard somebody submitted to radiology, whatever, and you're thinking for yourself, okay, perhaps that wasn't the right journal for this article, and I wouldn't dare to submit an article like that, because I would always wonder, okay, but then perhaps if I have an article which I think might be interesting and I submit that, then perhaps the editor has already remembered my name and thinks, okay, no, this person always kind of submits articles which are not really fitting for our journal. So is this like a real fear, or is this something like, not, you just indicated that you rather think it's something positive to just try to strive high?
May I just have another comment regarding publications? It's not so much regarding the quantity of publications, it's the quality. I'll give you an extreme example. We have had in our medical school a third-year resident in one of the specialties that published 120 papers in 3 years. He was very productive, and then the question was, he asked to be promoted to an associate level, associate professor level. And as a resident, how can you decide if a resident that is not an expert would be a professor of radiology just based on publications? And he published in every field in his specialty with no focus, and then at the end we decided that it can't happen. So this was the most extreme. The guy published 40 papers a year as first or last author. I mean, he wouldn't jump as a guest author on those papers, but still, this is to the extreme. So it's better to have one solid manuscript in radiology than to have 3 papers that are splitting the results in various publications with impact factor ranging between 1 and 2. Because this is, I believe, less important. It would make much more impact if you wait a little, like the basic researchers do. They don't publish so much. We publish much, we publish more than them. When they go and publish, it takes a few years of work that is consolidated and put as one manuscript.
I think we need to, I completely agree. I think we need to be realistic with each other on our work, how valued and it is. And we know that specifically for radiology, the demands are very, very high. The level of the manuscripts that are published are very, very a high leveled in our field. So we all know that we have some manuscripts and some studies that will be published, but they're not really valued or eligible to be submitted to radiology, because, as said before, they will be rejected. It's not really as high levels as others. And we know personally, I think the more we write and the more we research of what is considered qualified and has some real important value, and other stuff that are not so much and are worthwhile, of course, for publication, but are not that high leveled. And we should also, should be also a sort of help us deciding where to submit the manuscript once it's already written.
As far as I know, David, if I'm not mistaken, the acceptance rate for original papers in radiology is 8%, maybe 10% or so, 1 in 12. So just think that the 90th percentile is still not accepted, and those are great articles. So it means that radiology can choose the best ones, but percentile number 82 is a very good article. Manuscript will be published somewhere. And I would say another thing as a reviewer, this is something that I notice for myself, is when I review for a high-level journal, I would review a little bit different than for a third or a fourth level journal, because I don't have the same expectations. I would assume that this manuscript was already in some other journal, and so I wouldn't be so critical for the findings and the novelty as I would be for radiology, for instance. Like in a subspecialty journal that is of a lower level, I would do it a bit differently. That's my personal way of doing.
This is a great take, and with that, I like to do a smooth transition, as we are not running out of time, but we are already at least 5 minutes to the official end. We have been talking about some metrics and how the world of business and publishing changes, and I think publishing itself is a dynamic process. It never stays the same. We've talking a little bit about the COVID times, where the serving and the pre-pub servers has been a great topic. Currently, Twitter, social media, and all that gets more and more important to promote research. I don't know to which degree this has an impact on the quality, but it certainly has a great impact on the reach of the papers itself. And they're already commercial, I have to stress, metrics out there, Altimetrics, PlumX, etc., who kind of measuring that. I honestly have no idea. Also, I'm using social media a lot, where this road will lead us. But my gut, very plainly, simply-minded German guy, his gut speaks that this will have a role in the future next to the impact factor to assess a journal. I think there's no way out. Also, I don't like that, because it's not necessarily correlated to the quality. But I think in 10, 15 years, we will somehow measure the article quality beyond the impact factor and adds other metrics beyond that. And this will include social media, I think. But that's the gut of a German guy. What do the experts say? David and Jacob, what do you think? Is there a role of that, or is it just temporary effect?
Yeah, no, I really think there's a huge role for social media. But I looked at it a little bit differently in that, first of all, it gives the author a feedback as to how interesting their topic is to the general public, right? Rather than just radiology. So COVID's a great example of that. Anything on COVID was very popular in social media. It also one of the very big problems with radiology articles is they're hard to read, they're hard to understand. And I think that social media has a really large role in trying to explain what's in that article. And whether it's a podcast, whether it's a social media post, whether it's a distilled editorial, we have a real difficulty in understanding, first of all, what's the result? Number one. Number two is who or what does the result apply to? So I think social media can have a large role and help explaining the complex research as well.
I agree with David, but I don't foresee any university hopefully assessing the number of tweets of a manuscript as to be judged for promotion. I think it's the citation, and citation is still the basis of the spreading of scientific knowledge. And somehow, I mean, we might have new tools, but universities are quite conservative. And if they keep the level of science as the most important part and assessing the real impact, which is how you influence, not the public, the scientific world is judged by the way you impact or influence your other peers, which is different than impacting the public. I assume, as mentioned, most of us don't understand what Einstein wrote, but still we know about him, but it doesn't mean that he would be judged by us. He would be judged by fellow physicists. And it should be the same in other aspects of other fields of science. So being known, being popular, explainable science can be in Twitter. I would say personally, sometimes the first notion of an article I get from Twitter, which I didn't know that was published, and I'm happy with that. But as a scientist, I should be judged on the way that I impact my peers in the same field.
I also think it's challenges and opportunities, right? I'm sorry. I think it's challenges and opportunities because you can further a political agenda, right? So if the results are important, you can distribute them. You can probably change practice faster by making use of social media, but it's also a challenge because it's uncritically distributed potentially or even misunderstood, right?
But we shouldn't forget, I think here I'm opening a big door and kind of changing the topic, but after all, publication means basically we're handing our stuff over to a business, right? Because publishing papers is not only the scientific word, but well, Elsevier and all the other departments, they are kind of wanting to sell the product. This is, after all, a business model. We have to confess it. And I was surprised just going through several editorial meetings where I'm reviewing editing. So don't have to mention, there are not too many. They really ranked in every board meeting these metrics. And I was surprised. And I totally agree with you, Jacob. It shouldn't be there, but it was kind of, these were their many citations. This was the index here and there. And I was surprised. And anyways. I have to speed up a little bit. We could talk here for hours, but I would like to do a smooth transition to the final part, because the last, I would say, 15 minutes was more for the senior ones and junior researchers. We have learned that the majority, I think, was inspiring to listen to you, but they are really eager and keeping me busy. But I can break down their questions. And I think, Pascal, you make now link in, because this really connects this symposium with what we're doing at the School of Radiology, with also our other duties at the EGR. So I'm just quoting it because no need to paraphrase. I want to get formal mentorship to improve my skills. Any suggestions on opportunities available? Eventually, any editorial review or mentorship at a journal kind of related to you, Pascal and Jacob.
As said, we are actually taking the radiology review and mentorship program, which was built up by Jacob to the EGR, and yes, we are very, very. Also, I am personally extremely happy that we could onboard Jacob to the EJR. So there is the opportunity to participate in the reviewer mentorship program, which will practically start, well, very, very soon.
As I have to say on a personal note, as a mentee of Jacob, that this is really a very important mentorship program. The value of being of writing a review, and not just writing a review, I can write whatever I want, but being tutored to the point that what we need to look into, what actually needs to be looked into when you afterwards write the manuscript yourself, are very cherishable. And as personally as I've been in this I started with this program like 2.5 years ago, and I felt on my personal writing skills, it took me up a notch, and I felt that in many aspects it gives very much, it is very important. On the other hand, of course, it's important for the journal to have more reviewers, and now as a formal reviewer for radiology, it keeps the pool, as mentioned before, ongoing, since it is very time consuming, and all these things were mentioned before, and all of us don't like sending the manuscript and getting 6 months later a rejection after because nobody reviewed it on time. So this really keeps both. It's important for us as writers and on the writing side, and also on the other side to really keep things going and to the best achieve excellence in both aspects.
I would just mention, but please, Isabel.
It's also what would be possible to, for example, join like the newsletters of many radiological societies. They often send offers around, like, for example, I mean, I don't want, this is kind of perhaps a concurring journal, but like for example, the ESRs is offering also editorial fellowships. And if you're subscribing yourself to the newsletter, you'll get this information with all the deadlines where you can apply for programs like that. And perhaps I'm not really sure for the moment, but I could imagine that perhaps the RSNA is doing something similar.
But the thing is, currently we are really running in a shortage. I think that is for most editors I'm in contact with. They have the same problem that we have a lack of reviewers. So that's really an opportunity for everyone who is really interested in learning, because we as editors, as an editor, I'm very keen on onboarding new and enthusiastic reviewers who want to learn, and we are trying to offer really something back, to give something back. And with Jacob, at least at the EJR, I think it's really an opportunity.
Yeah, I would just mention that Naama said I was a mentor, and the year after that she got a certificate for reviewing with special distinction. So it wasn't because of me; it was because of her. But still, it's a sign. I think that your ramp-up period by doing it yourself is longer than if you do it when you are mentored. And just regarding the numbers, we started the program in 2020 through the COVID, and we have 65 reviewers that graduated from the program. So more than 20 a year, and now it's about 7 to 8% of the reviewers in radiology. You need hundreds of reviewers for each topic and each subspecialty. So it does make a difference. And if you can't get to such a program, I would urge you to ask a senior level radiologist in your department to mentor you, even to take a published article, like in a journal club, or do it on a one-on-one session to analyze and try and understand it better. I think this is something, this one-on-one interaction is extremely important.
David, anything you want to add? Seems
it is really good comments. The other thing, I don't know if it's been mentioned, but there have been more efforts on having trainee editorial boards. So the editorial boards for most journals are basically a bunch of old people, right? But the energy of the journal in the field comes from younger people. And radiology started a radiology and training editorial board, and it's been very successful. Similar numbers of new reviewers. They become some of the best reviewers for the journal. They advance their own careers. Became a little competitive after a while, but not overly so. If you're interested, there were maybe 10 to 15 positions and maybe 40 to 50 applications a year, probably gone up a little bit. But other journals are also doing these trainee editorial boards, and you can learn a tremendous amount from other people, from your peers. And we did lectures for the editorial board members. They had access to write certain types of commentary or articles as well. So it's another format that is also may help you when you're starting out.
So first of all, and most of all, it is my heartful really wish to thank you all that you joined our session. We have here 40 people. We have now 80 people online. There will be 100 watching it plus later on YouTube, but not better why. We want to thank you for sharing with us your time. And I want, first of all, obviously, ladies first, thanks the ladies joining us here. So thanks Isabel, thanks Nama for being at the panel, sharing your vision on the topic, which is definitely a never-ending story, which I now have to wrap up, unfortunately, because I made up the agenda of 90 minutes. I'm to blame here, definitely. I want to thank David Bluemke and Jacob Sosna for giving these outstanding lectures, but even more sharing their personal insights in a field which is really, really, really important. And it is the foundation of everything what we do, if I may say so. Hopefully not too pathetic, in our academic life. Because if you don't understand the quality of research, you cannot talk about it. It's like a conductor who cannot read the score, right? You can do nice moves and give great speeches and people will applaud to you, but if you don't read the scores, if you don't need your harmony, you're lost. And if you're not into music, take your parallel, you will find one. I want to thank the audience for being here with us. It's now already a little late, but we still have 60 plus entities here live. And once again, I received tons of emails who said, oh, I'm in call, I have a call, there's something, I have COVID, I have to work clinically. Please, can we watch the YouTube? Obviously, you can. I have not asked you, David and Jacob, whether I can take screenshots, but I still did. Hopefully that's okay. These are my favorite screenshots. It's just personally. This is a take I really love because I remember Pascal and myself, we were still R1 residents and Pascal received a review for cardiac MR. And we were obviously breast guys, we still are. And he said, oh, I have no idea, how can I review that? And this is exactly the point why I never heard it that concisely. You don't always need to understand the topic, but always need to understand the science. I think this is essential. And sometimes you can review it different. And this is a wonderful quotation from Anthony Proto. I really love that. Another thing which I fished from your keynote, Jacob, was, and this was really great. We are in social media all the time. We have push-ups and we have to think, we have to recheck. We are pushed all the time. Think it, take it easy. Go out for a run, go out for hiking, fishing, whatever you do, and think about it. Like making a dough. Take 1 or 2 days. Don't hurry. And then let it go and write it down. I think that is very important. Don't do it like 1, 2, 3, 4, next. This is not like writing a chest X-ray report. This is something which needs time. This is a creative process after all. I would have loved, I have to skip that, to discuss the discussion formula, because this is something where authors and eventually reviewers are frequently stuck. So this is just a snapshot, maybe an idea for the next upcoming symposium, if you're not fed up with us yet. But what was very dear to me were the personal comments by David. And I think we all agree on that. Please treat the manuscript like you would wish your own to be treated. I think this is very, very important. This is not just a business, doing a pizza for someone. This is something which is in a community, you are passionate to provide real value. And even if you haven't have enough sleep, always read the manuscript, always take your time. This is about caring for the work of others and do it exactly the same way like you would be treated. This is more like a soft skill, I think, comment, but it's, I think, super, super important. So thanks, Dave, for making this point so clear. It was really moving. There are many programs for editing mentorship. This is not a promo for the EGR, it's just a hybrid role. Pascal and SFF, I have, hopefully, forgive for me that, David. If you're interested, join our Reaver mentoring program, and this is going to be led by our new incoming professor, associate editor Jacob Sosna. Would it be wonderful? And just from the director's perspective again, so I switched my role, now I'm left. What's next? Evaluation, it's already running. Please give us your feedbacks. We will share the video, and maybe you're interested in a sequel to this series. And for that, we're going to be very grateful that you share your opinion, your ideas, your wishes, what would be valuable for you, because we don't know everything. Obviously, we are here to learn with you. Go to our YouTube channel and check out the outstanding lectures of the previous symposium. Very cool. I'm going to share the link later on. And with that, thank you very much. Thank you so much. I will now step in the background. Final words to Pascal, and a final thanks, I think, Pascal, to our dear guests today.
Thank you, Matthias. It's always a pleasure to have some very few last words. No, thank you very, very much for the intense discussions. Matthias, you really made a point. What really also struck me was the comment by David, which I had to say that I probably sometimes was not so good at that, and probably that's why I never ended up with the special distinction award in radiology, but only distinction because it's a respect for the authors in the review. I, for instance, personally have to just admit that I'm quite harsh sometimes in my criticism. Probably it's a German trait or something, but I think Matthias already also pointed at that. You really have to respect the authors and their work, and I think I've never ever have it heard that balanced, that we need to treat ourselves with respect. So hearing that, I really have to say thank you very much, Namar, for your very insightful comments. Isabel, thank you very much. Jacob, that was really, really great, some real insights. And David, that was really absolutely outstanding. Thank you very much also to the audience for staying with us. And Matthias, someone has also to thank you for the really great moderation and directorship.
Thank you. Do what we can. So it's time for the final countdown. We are not in the recording studios, so thank you everybody for being here. You all deserve a great applause. Thanks for sharing your time. Have a good one, and would be great to see you back at the School of Radiology.
Thank you.
Bye.